avoided for good. Reason: what she discovered hidden beneath the crumbling porch would not only change her life forever, but would reveal a presidential safe house that had been secretly maintained for over 4 decades. One that would bring Secret Service agents racing to her property before dawn. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria Rodriguez stared at the red-lettered eviction notice. Trembling in her hands, the words blurring through tears she refused to let fall. Final notice. 7 days to vacate. She set the paper down on her kitchen table next to the mountain of unpaid bills and a framed photo of her 5-year-old daughter. Sophia building sandcastles at the beach last summer, back when life still held promise. The morning light streamed through the thin curtains of their cramped apartment, illuminating dust motes that danced like her shattered dreams. Sophia was still asleep in the bedroom they shared, clutching her worn, stuffed elephant blissfully, unaware that their world was crumbling around them. 8 months ago, Maria's life had been completely different. She'd had a stable job as a medical technician at the regional hospital, a reliable husband named Carlos, and dreams of buying their own home. Then Carlos had simply vanished one Tuesday morning, leaving behind only a note saying he needed to find himself, and a stack of hidden credit card debt that nearly gave Maria a heart attack. The debt collectors started calling within a week. Apparently, Carlos had been living a double life, using credit cards Maria never knew existed to fund a lifestyle she'd never seen. Gambling debts, expensive dinners at restaurants she'd never been to, payments to women whose names she didn't recognize. The man she'd trusted with her heart and their future had destroyed everything while looking her in the eye and promising they'd grow old together. At 31, Maria had never imagined she'd be in this position. She'd worked 2 jobs through college, earned her medical technology certification, and had always been the responsible one. But when Sophia developed chronic ear infections that required frequent doctor visits and eventually surgery, Maria had to reduce her hours to part-time to manage the appointments. The medical bills, even with insurance, had eaten through their savings. Carlos's disappearance had been the final domino in a chain of financial disaster. Without his income, Maria couldn't afford their rent, utilities, and the minimum payments. On debts she'd never agreed to. The hospital had been understanding at first, but when she started missing shifts due to Sophia's medical needs and the stress of her situation, they'd had to let her go. "Mommy?" Sophia's small voice came from the doorway, her dark curls disheveled from sleep. "Why are you up so early?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maria quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. "Just thinking about breakfast, Mia. How about some cereal before we go to Grandma Rosa's house?" Sophia's face lit up. Rosa had been their neighbor for years and had become like family, often watching Sophia when Maria worked. The elderly woman had offered them her couch temporarily, but Maria knew they couldn't impose forever. As she poured cereal for her daughter, Maria's mind raced through dwindling options. Her parents had passed away in a car accident 3 years ago. Her sister lived across the country with barely enough income to support her own family. Maria had already sold everything of value. Her engagement ring, her car that was replaced with a 15-year-old Honda with more miles than hope, even Sophia's unopened toys from last Christmas. The social worker from Child Protective Services had been kind but clear during her visit last week. "Miss Rodriguez, we understand this is temporary hardship, but we need to see a stable housing situation within the month, or we'll have to consider alternative arrangements for Sophia's welfare." The thought of losing her daughter made Maria's chest tighten with panic. Sophia was everything good left in her world. The reason she got up every morning and fought through another day of rejection letters, minimum wage job applications, and the crushing weight of impossible choices. After dropping Sophia at Rosa's apartment, Maria sat in her car, scrolling through housing listings on her cracked phone screen. Everything within her budget was either in dangerous neighborhoods or so far from Sophia's school and Maria's job search area that transportation would be impossible with her unreliable car. She was about to close the browser in frustration when an unusual advertisement caught her eye. County tax auction, Saturday 9 a.m., various properties available, cash only, sold as is. Curious, she clicked through to see a list of properties being auctioned for unpaid taxes. Most were vacant lots or condemned buildings in rough parts of town, but one listing made her pause. 15-acre farmhouse property, Millfield County. Starting bid $500. Property includes two-story farmhouse, needs renovation, barn and outbuildings. Seized for non-payment of property taxes after 20-plus years of abandonment. The photos showed a white farmhouse that had seen better days, with peeling paint and a sagging porch surrounded by overgrown fields. But it was a house with land, and the starting bid was less than 2 months' rent on their current apartment. Millfield County was about an hour's drive from the city, but Sophia's school had a sister campus there, and Maria had seen nursing assistant positions posted at the rural medical clinic. The isolation that probably deterred other buyers might actually be a blessing. Privacy to rebuild their lives away from the whispers and pitying looks of neighbors who knew about Carlos's abandonment. Maria spent the rest of the day researching the property. The farmhouse had been built in 1952 by a family named Morrison. After the original owners died, it had passed through several hands before being purchased in 1978 by someone listed only as Presidential Holdings, LLC. The property had sat vacant since 2003, when the LLC mysteriously stopped paying taxes. The more she read, the more curious she became. Why would a company buy a remote farmhouse and then abandon it for decades? The satellite images showed the house was isolated, surrounded by woods on 3 sides, with a long private driveway leading from a rural highway. That evening, after tucking Sophia into bed with a story about brave princesses who never gave up, Maria made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She would go to the auction with her remaining $1,000. If she could buy the farmhouse, even in poor condition, she and Sophia would have a roof over their heads that no landlord could take away. "It's crazy," she whispered to herself, staring at her phone screen showing the farmhouse photo. "Absolutely insane to spend my last money on a house that probably doesn't have working plumbing or electricity." But what was the alternative? Homeless shelters were full, and the waiting list for subsidized housing was measured in years, not months. At least with the farmhouse, she'd owned something. Even if it took years to make it livable, it would be theirs. Saturday morning arrived grey and drizzly, matching Maria's mood as she drove to the county courthouse. Sophia was spending the day with Rosa, who'd listened to Maria's plan with raised eyebrows, but had ultimately given her blessing. "Sometimes, Mija, we have to take leaps of faith. Your parents would be proud of your courage." The auction room was more crowded than Maria had expected, filled with men in expensive suits examining folders of property information. She felt out of place in her second-hand dress and worn shoes, clutching an envelope containing her life savings in crumpled 20s and 50s. As she listened to early lots being auctioned, commercial properties and vacant lots going for tens of thousands of dollars, Maria's confidence wavered. These people clearly knew what they were doing, while she was flying blind on desperation and hope. When the auctioneer announced Lot 47, Millfield County farmhouse and acreage, Maria's heart began pounding. She noticed several bidders shaking their heads and putting down their paddles before the bidding even started. Starting bid 500. Do I hear 500? Maria's hand trembled as she raised her paddle. 500 from bidder 23. Do I hear 600? She held her breath, expecting immediate competition, but the room remained silent. The auctioneer looked puzzled, scanning the crowd. 500 going once, going twice. 1,000, Maria blurted out, immediately regretting, speaking out of turn. Several people turned to stare at her, and she felt her face burn with embarrassment. The auctioneer smiled. 1,000 from bidder 23. Do I hear 1,100? Silence. Maria looked around in disbelief. In a room full of real estate investors, no one wanted this property badly enough to bid against her. 1,000 going once, going twice, sold to bidder 23 for $1,000. Maria's legs felt weak as she made her way to the clerk's table to complete the paperwork. As she signed documents and handed over every dollar to her name, the clerk, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, gave her a concerned look. "The Morrison place, huh?" Patricia said quietly, processing Maria's payment. "That's been on our books for 20 years. You know there's a reason nobody else bid, don't you?" Maria's stomach tightened. "What kind of reason?" Patricia glanced around as if making sure no one was listening. "That property has a strange history. The Morrison family built it as a regular farmhouse, but after they sold it in '78, things got weird. Locals reported government vehicles coming and going at all hours. Security improvements were made, cameras, fencing, communication equipment. On the roof." She lowered her voice further. "Some folks think it was some kind of government safe house. After the last owners stopped paying taxes, there were federal agents asking questions around town. And strange thing is, even though it's been abandoned for years, the electricity never got cut off. County assumed it was some clerical error, but..." Maria felt a chill despite the warm courthouse air. "What are you trying to tell me?" Patricia shrugged. "Probably nothing. Small towns love their conspiracy theories. Just thought you should know what you're getting into." She handed Maria the deed and a set of keys. "My advice? Be careful out there, and maybe don't go poking around too much at first. Let sleeping. Dogs lie, you know." Sophia was thrilled when Maria explained they were moving to a real farmhouse with land. "Can we have chickens, Mama? And maybe a horse?" "Maybe someday, mi amor," Maria said, her stomach churning with anxiety about what they'd actually find at the property. "First, we need to see what kind of work the house needs." The drive to Millfield County took them through increasingly rural landscape. Farmhouses dotted rolling hills, and the city's smog gave way to clean air that made Maria feel slightly more hopeful. Maybe this hadn't been such a crazy decision after all. They turned onto Riverside Road according to the directions, then onto a smaller gravel road marked by a weather-beaten sign reading "Morrison Farm, Private Property." The driveway wound through dense woods for nearly a quarter-mile before opening into a clearing. Maria's first glimpse of their new home made her question everything. The two-story farmhouse looked even more dilapidated than in the photos. White paint had peeled away in large chunks, revealing grey wood underneath. The wraparound porch sagged dangerously, and several windows were either broken or boarded up. But beyond the obvious neglect, there were things that seemed odd for an abandoned property. The driveway, though overgrown, was still clearly defined and seemed to have been gravelled relatively recently. Power lines led to the house, and she could see what looked like a satellite dish partially hidden by overgrown trees. "It looks like a haunted house," Sophia exclaimed with the excitement only a 5-year-old could muster. "Like in the Princess movies." "It just needs some love," Maria replied, trying to convince herself as much as Sophia. "And now it's our house to love." As they approached the front porch, Maria noticed something else strange. Despite the house's apparent abandonment, there were no signs of vandalism, no graffiti, no broken beer bottles, no evidence that teenagers had used it as a party spot. For a property that had supposedly been empty for decades in an area accessible by car, that level of preservation seemed unlikely. The key turned smoothly in the front door lock, which surprised Maria given the house's condition. The door swung, open with a creak that would have been at home in any horror movie, revealing a dusty but reasonably intact interior. "Sophia, stay close to me," Maria called as her daughter started to explore. "We need to make sure the floors are safe." Inside, the house was a time capsule of simple farmhouse life, but with peculiar touches that didn't fit. The main floor included a spacious living room with a stone fireplace, a formal dining room, and a large kitchen with appliances that looked like they belonged in the 1980s rather than the 1950s when the house was built. What caught Maria's attention were the sophisticated electrical fixtures throughout the house. Multiple phone jacks in every room, cable outlets in unusual locations, and light switches that seemed more complex than standard residential wiring would require. The kitchen was in better shape than she'd expected, though it would need a thorough cleaning and some appliance updates. When she turned the kitchen faucet experimentally, rusty water sputtered out, then ran clear and strong. At least the well still worked. "Mama, look!" Sophia called from what appeared to be a study. "There's a big desk and empty bookshelves." Maria joined her daughter in the small room off the living area. Built-in bookshelves covered 2 walls, and an executive-style desk sat positioned to face the room's single window, which had a clear view of the driveway. She tried the desk drawers, but they were locked. The house felt strange in a way Maria couldn't articulate. It wasn't just the abandoned atmosphere or the dust and cobwebs. There was an underlying sense that this place had been important to someone, that it had served a purpose beyond just being a family home. As they explored the second floor, Maria found 3 bedrooms and a bathroom that would need significant updates, but had good bones. The master bedroom was large enough to accommodate Sophia's bed as well as her own temporarily, and the front windows offered a beautiful view of the rolling fields and distant mountains. But it was in the smallest bedroom that Maria found the first real clue that Patricia's warnings might have been more than small-town gossip. Behind where a bed might have stood, the wall had what appeared to be a sliding panel, though it was painted over and difficult to see unless you knew to look for it. "Mama, what's that?" Sophia asked, pointing at the wall. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Maybe just old repair work." But Maria made a mental note to investigate later when Sophia wasn't around. They spent the rest of the day making the house minimally livable. Maria managed to get the electricity turned on by calling the number on a utility pole, surprised when the representative seemed to already have the account information and simply needed to reactivate service for the property. That evening, they camped out in the living room with sleeping bags and takeout pizza from the small town 15 minutes away. Sophia fell asleep quickly, exhausted from exploring their new home. But Maria lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the countryside. Around midnight, she thought she heard a car engine in the distance, but when she looked out the window, she saw nothing. Probably just her imagination, fueled by Patricia's warnings and the stress of such a dramatic life change. What Maria didn't realize was that her purchase of the property had triggered automated alerts that were, even now, being reviewed by very serious people in a very serious building in Washington, D.C. The Morrison farmhouse hadn't been abandoned for 20 years. It had been mothballed, maintained, and monitored, waiting for the day someone might stumble upon secrets that had been buried there since the Carter administration. By dawn, those serious people would make the decision that needed to be acted upon immediately. And Maria Rodriguez's simple dream of providing her daughter with a stable, home would intersect with presidential-level security concerns in ways she could never have imagined. Maria woke at dawn to the sound of vehicles coming down her driveway, multiple vehicles. Her heart raced as she carefully peered through the dusty curtains of the living room window. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows were pulling into her. The front yard, their engines still running. Men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that made Maria's blood run cold. These weren't police officers or county officials. These people carried themselves with an authority that transcended local law enforcement. "Sophia," she whispered urgently, gently shaking her daughter awake. "We need to get dressed quickly." "Okay, some people are here to talk to Mama." Sophia rubbed her eyes sleepily. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Sometimes when adults buy old houses, other adults need to check things. Nothing to worry about." Maria forced calm into her voice while her mind raced. She quickly pulled on jeans and a sweater, helped Sophia into her clothes, and tried to think of how to handle whatever was about to happen. Before she could finish tying Sophia's shoes, a firm knock echoed through the house. The kind of knock that said the person on the other side wasn't going away and wasn't interested in waiting. Maria opened the front door to find herself facing a tall woman in her 40s with steel-grey hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of Maria's appearance in seconds. "Miss Rodriguez," the woman said, her voice carrying unmistakable authority. "I'm Agent Sarah Blackwood, United States Secret Service. We need to speak with you regarding this property and your purchase yesterday." Behind Agent Blackwood stood several men in suits, all with the same alert, professional demeanor. Over their shoulders, Maria could see that they'd positioned themselves strategically around the property. "Secret Service?" Maria's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I don't understand. I just bought this house at a tax auction. Everything was legal. I have all the paperwork." "No one is suggesting you've done anything wrong," Agent Blackwood interrupted, but her tone wasn't exactly reassuring. "May we come in? This conversation would be better conducted privately." Maria glanced back at Sophia, who was watching the proceedings with wide eyes. "My daughter is here. I'd prefer if we could talk outside first, so I can call someone to—" "Miss Rodriguez," Agent Blackwood's voice carried a note of urgency. "I understand your concern for your daughter's well-being, but this is a matter of national security, and time is a factor. We need to speak with you immediately about what you may have discovered on this property." The phrase national security sent a chill down Maria's spine. She had no choice but to step aside and let them enter her new home. Agent Blackwood gestured to one of her companions, who immediately approached Sophia with a kind smile that seemed genuine despite the circumstances. "Hi there, I'm Agent Martinez. What's your name?" "Sophia," her daughter replied shyly, instinctively moving closer to Maria. "That's a beautiful name. Sophia, would you like to sit here with this coloring book while your mum talks with us?" He produced an activity book and crayons from somewhere in his jacket. "We just need to ask your mum some grown-up questions about your new house." Once Sophia was settled with her coloring, Agent Blackwood turned her full attention to Maria. "Miss Rodriguez, our records indicate you purchased this property yesterday for $1,000. Were you aware of its previous ownership or purposes?" "The county clerk mentioned it might have been used by the government somehow, but she made it sound like local rumors," Maria answered honestly. "I was just looking for affordable housing. I never imagined—" "What exactly did Patricia Williams tell you about this property?" The Agent Blackwood's question was sharp, and the fact that she knew the county clerk's name told Maria these people had already been busy this morning. Maria recounted her conversation with Patricia, watching Agent Blackwood's expression remain neutral throughout. When she finished, the agent exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Miss Rodriguez, this property was indeed used by the government. Specifically, it served as a secure retreat location for presidential use from 1978 to 2003. What you've purchased is not just an abandoned farmhouse, but a former presidential safe house. The words hit Maria like physical blows. Presidential safe house. She'd bought a place where presidents had stayed, where national security decisions might have been made. No wonder no one else had bid against her. But why was it sold for taxes? Wouldn't the government want to keep it? Agent Blackwood's expression softened slightly. After 9/11, security protocols changed dramatically. This location was deemed too remote and vulnerable for modern presidential security requirements. It was decommissioned, and ownership was transferred to a holding company that was supposed to maintain it indefinitely. Due to administrative errors and budget cuts, property taxes went unpaid, leading to the auction. Sophia looked up from her coloring. "Mama, did presidents really come to our house?" Before Maria could answer, Agent Martinez smiled at Sophia. "Yes, they did. Pretty cool, right? Your house is very special." Agent Blackwood continued, "The issue, Miss Rodriguez, is that while the property was decommissioned for presidential use, certain security features and potentially sensitive materials may still be present. We need to conduct a thorough search to ensure nothing compromising remains." Maria felt overwhelmed. "So you want to search my house? The house I just bought? With my last $1,000. We understand this is disruptive, and we apologize for the circumstances. However, this is not a request." Agent Blackwood's tone made it clear that cooperation wasn't optional. "We also need to know, have you found anything unusual since moving in? Any rooms or areas that seem out of place for a farmhouse?" Maria thought about the sliding panel in the upstairs bedroom, the sophisticated electrical systems, the fact that the house had been maintained despite apparent abandonment. There are some things that seem odd for a 1950s farmhouse, modern electrical work, that kind of thing. "What specifically?" Agent Blackwood pressed. "Extra phone jacks, complex light switches, what looks like a hidden panel upstairs." The agents exchanged significant looks. "Miss Rodriguez, we need you and your daughter to step outside while we conduct our search, for your safety and ours." "How long will this take?" Maria asked, thinking about Sophia's medication schedule and the fact that they had no other place to go. "Several hours at minimum. We've arranged for you and your daughter to stay at a local bed and breakfast until we complete our work." Agent Martinez approached with something that looked like a child-friendly tablet. "Sophia, would you like to play some games? We have some really cool educational apps." As Maria gathered their immediate necessities, she couldn't help but feel that the life she desperately tried to rebuild was once again spinning out of control. But then she looked at Sophia, who was chattering excitedly to Agent Martinez about presidents and secret houses, and realized something important. Her daughter wasn't scared. Sophia was fascinated, treating this like an adventure rather than a crisis. Maybe Maria had been looking at this all wrong. Instead of seeing this as another disaster in a series of disasters, maybe this was an opportunity. "Agent Blackwood," Maria said as they prepared to leave, "what happens after your search? Can we still live here?" "That depends on what we find," the agent replied. "But Miss Rodriguez, I want you to understand that your willingness to cooperate in this matter will be noted. The fact that you contacted no media, attempted no exploitation of this situation, speaks well of your character." As they were escorted to one of the SUVs, Maria had a realization that filled her with unexpected strength. For months, she'd felt powerless, a victim of circumstances beyond her control, but now, by pure chance, she'd become part of something significant. She owned property that had housed presidents, that had been part of American history. The bed and breakfast was charming, far nicer than any place Maria could normally afford. The owner, clearly briefed by the Secret Service, treated them like honored guests rather than displaced homeowners. Sophia delighted in room service and cable television, luxuries that had been absent from their recent life. Agent Martinez stopped by in the afternoon with updates. "The search is proceeding well. I wanted to let you know that we've found nothing that would prevent you from continuing to live at the property." "Really?" Maria felt relief flood through her. "However, there are some renovations that need to be completed for security reasons. The government will cover these costs, and during the work, your lodging here will be provided." Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're going to fix up my house for free?" "Certain modifications are necessary to ensure any remaining security features are properly deactivated. Think of it as the government's way of apologizing for the inconvenience." That evening, as Sophia watched cartoons in their temporary home, Maria sat on the small balcony overlooking Millfield's main street. 6 months ago, she'd been married with a stable life. 4 months ago, she'd discovered her husband's betrayal and debts. 2 days ago, she'd been facing homelessness. Now she owned a property with presidential history, was being treated like an honored guest by federal agents, and would soon have a renovated home with no mortgage. It was so improbable that it felt like a fairy tale. But the most important change was internal. The desperate, broken woman who'd sat in that courthouse auction room was gone. In her place was someone who'd faced down Secret Service agents, who'd managed to protect her daughter through another upheaval, who'd somehow landed on her feet despite impossible odds. Agent Blackwood visited the next morning with final details. "Miss Rodriguez, our search found exactly what we expected. Deactivated security systems, some old communication equipment, and a few rooms that had been sealed but contained nothing sensitive. The hidden panel upstairs led to a small safe room, standard for this type of facility. It's been cleared and will remain accessible to you." Agent Blackwood paused, then smiled, the first genuine smile Maria had seen from her. "You made quite an impression on my team. The way you handled this situation, your concern for your daughter, your cooperation, it's been exemplary." Maria felt pride swell in her chest. When was the last time someone had complimented her strength? "There's something else," Agent Blackwood continued. "The renovation team found that this property sits on one of the most beautiful pieces of land in the county. The previous security modifications included environmental improvements, enhanced well water systems, updated electrical throughout, even a buried propane system for backup power." "What does that mean for us?" "It means you've inherited not just a house, but a completely self-sufficient property. The kind of place that could be turned into anything: a family farm, a bed and breakfast, a retreat center." As Agent Blackwood left, she handed Maria a business card. "If you ever have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to call. And Miss Rodriguez, you've proven that sometimes the right person finds the right place exactly when they need each other most." The renovations took 3 weeks, during which Maria and Sophia lived comfortably at the bed and breakfast. The government contractors worked with the efficiency that amazed Maria, updating everything while maintaining the farmhouse's original character. When they finally returned home, Maria gasped. The house looked like something from a home magazine. The wraparound porch had been rebuilt and painted white, the windows were all new, and the whole structure seemed to stand straighter somehow. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. The kitchen had been completely modernized with granite, counters and stainless appliances. The bathrooms had been renovated with care to match the farmhouse aesthetic. Every room had been painted, floored, and furnished with pieces that seemed chosen specifically for their comfort and style. But the most significant change was in Maria herself. As she walked through her transformed home, she realized that the scared, desperate woman who'd made the impulsive auction bid was gone. In her place stood someone who'd negotiated with federal agents, protected her daughter through uncertainty, and emerged stronger than before. "Mama, it's like a princess house now," Sophia announced, running from room to room. That evening, as they sat on their new porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Maria made a decision. She would honor this gift she'd been given. Not just the house, but the opportunity to rebuild their lives completely. She called Rosa first. "Rosa, you'll never believe what's happened to us." After explaining the incredible sequence of events, Rosa laughed. "Mija, I told you sometimes we need to take leaps of faith. You trusted that this was the right choice, even when it seemed impossible." Next, Maria called Sophia's pediatrician to transfer their care to the local clinic. To her surprise, the clinic was in desperate need of a medical technician, and her experience made her an immediately attractive candidate. Within a month, Maria had not only secured employment, but had been offered a full-time position with benefits. The clinic appreciated her bilingual skills and experience with electronic medical records, skills that had once seemed common but proved valuable in rural healthcare. As autumn arrived and Maria settled into her new routine, she began to see the journey differently. Every challenge, Carlos's abandonment, the debt, the job loss, even the eviction notice, had been necessary steps leading to this moment. One evening, Agent Martinez stopped by for a friendly check-in. "How are you settling in?" "Wonderfully," Maria replied honestly. "I keep thinking this is all too good to be true." "Sometimes life has a way of balancing out," he said. "You lost a husband who wasn't worthy of you and found independence. You lost a job and found a better one. You lost an apartment and gained a home with history." He was right, Maria realized. She'd spent so much time seeing herself as a victim of circumstances that she'd missed the strength she'd developed through adversity. Each challenge had prepared her for the next, building resilience she didn't know she possessed. Sophia thrived. In her new school, her asthma improving dramatically in the clean country air. The teachers noted her confidence and curiosity, traits that had emerged as her living situation stabilized. One day, finding Sophia playing in the former safe room, now her fantasy fort, Maria marveled at how her daughter had adapted. To Sophia, this was simply home, a place where she felt secure and loved. Maria began volunteering at the local food pantry, remembering too well what hunger and desperation felt like. She started a small garden, teaching Sophia about growing their own food. The property's rich soil, enhanced by years of government maintenance, produced vegetables that amazed their neighbors. By Christmas, their lives had transformed completely. What had started as a desperate gamble had become a story of resilience, proving that sometimes the scariest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Standing in her kitchen Christmas morning, watching Sophia open presents under a tree that filled the farmhouse with pine scent, Maria felt gratitude so deep it took her breath away. They'd lost everything once, but in losing everything, they'd found something better, not just a home, but proof that they could handle whatever life brought them. The farmhouse that had once sheltered presidents now sheltered dreams coming. True, and Maria Rodriguez had learned that sometimes the smallest acts of courage lead to the most extraordinary transformations. 6 months after the Secret Service visit, Maria had settled into a life she could never have imagined. The farmhouse had become more than just a home. It had become a symbol of transformation and resilience that inspired everyone who heard. Her story, working at the Millfield Medical Clinic, had proven to be far more than just employment. Dr. Elizabeth Nash, the clinic director, had quickly recognized Maria's exceptional skills and dedication. Within 3 months, she'd been promoted to lead medical technician, overseeing the clinic's modernization of their electronic record system. "Maria," Dr. Nash called her into the office one morning, "I've been reviewing your work, and I have a proposition." Maria settled into the chair across from Dr. Nash's desk, curious. Over the months, she'd found that the rural clinic was exactly where she belonged. The pace was manageable enough to spend quality time with Sophia, yet challenging enough to keep her skills sharp. The State Health Department has approved our application for a mobile clinic program, Dr. Nash explained, her eyes bright with excitement. We'll be serving underserved rural communities throughout the county. I want you to head the program. The offer was overwhelming. Head the program? Dr. Nash, I'm honored, but I'm just a med tech. You're not just anything, Maria. You've revolutionized our patient care protocols, improved our efficiency by 30%, and every patient specifically requests you. More importantly, you understand what it means to need healthcare access, but face barriers getting it. Maria thought about her own struggles, times when Sophia needed care but they couldn't afford it, when transportation was a barrier, when language differences made medical visits intimidating. I grew up in communities like the ones we'd serve, she said slowly. I know what it's like to choose between rent and prescriptions. Exactly. This program could serve hundreds of families who currently drive 2 hours to the nearest hospital or simply go without care. Will you consider it? That evening, Maria sat on her porch with Sophia, watching the sun set over their land. The property had given them so much more than shelter. It had provided a foundation for rebuilding their entire lives. Mama, what's the mobile clinic? Sophia asked. She'd overheard Maria's phone call with Rosa, excitedly sharing the day's news. It's like a doctor's office on wheels, Mija. We drive to small towns and help people who can't easily get to doctors. Sophia's face lit up. Like superheroes, but with medicine. Her daughter's innocent observation struck Maria deeply. Yes, it would be exactly like that, bringing hope and healing to places that needed it most, just as this property had brought hope to their own lives when they needed it most. Over the weekend, Maria made a decision that surprised even herself. She would accept the position, but with a twist that would honor their journey fully. She would also transform part of their property into something that could benefit the entire community. Monday morning, she walked into Dr. Nash's office with a counter-proposal. I'll head the mobile clinic program, but I have an idea that could expand our impact even further. She spread out hand-drawn plans across the desk. Our property has that large barn that's barely being used. What if we converted it into a community wellness center? A place where the mobile clinic could be based, but also offer health education classes, support groups, maybe even a food pantry focused on nutrition education. Dr. Nash studied the drawings, her excitement growing. Maria, this is brilliant. You're talking about creating a true community health hub. The Secret Service renovations left us with infrastructure that's already beyond what a normal farmhouse needs. Commercial-grade electrical, high-speed internet, even backup power systems. It's like the property was meant for something bigger than just housing one family. Within weeks, Maria's vision began taking shape. The State Health Department not only approved the mobile clinic program, but provided additional grants for the Community Wellness Center. Local businesses donated materials and labor, inspired by Maria's story and commitment to helping others. The barn conversion became a community effort. Neighbors who had once seemed distant, typical in rural areas where people kept to themselves, came forward to help. Maria learned that many of them had heard whispered stories about the Secret Service visit and her family's journey. Carlos, a local contractor, approached her one afternoon as work progressed. Mrs. Rodriguez, I wanted you to know, what you're doing here, it means everything to people like my family. My wife has diabetes, and the nearest endocrinologist is 3 hours away. This mobile clinic will change our lives. His words reinforced what Maria was beginning to understand. Their personal transformation had created ripples that extended far beyond their property boundaries. Every challenge she'd overcome had prepared her to help others face their own obstacles. Sophia had become the unofficial mascot of the project. After school, she'd do homework in the barn, while adults worked around her, offering earnest suggestions and helping sort supplies. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and workers often commented that seeing the future they were building made the effort more meaningful. "Look, Mama," Sophia announced one day, showing Maria a drawing. "I drew our house, but also the clinic and all the people we're helping." The drawing showed stick figures with smiles across the entire property, their farmhouse surrounded by gardens, the transformed barn filled with people, and small squares, she explained, were houses for the medicine truck. Dr. Nash visited regularly to observe the progress. One afternoon, she pulled Maria aside with news that took her breath away. "Maria, I've been contacted by the State Medical Association. They want to feature your community wellness model as a pilot program. If successful, it could be replicated throughout rural areas across the state." Featured, what does that mean? It means you're not just helping our community, you're potentially changing how rural healthcare is delivered everywhere. The combination of mobile services, community education, and local support networks you've created is exactly what rural medicine needs. That evening, Maria called Agent Blackwood, whose card she'd kept as a reminder of how far they'd come. "Agent Blackwood, I wanted to thank you again for how your team handled everything, but I also wanted to share something wonderful that's come from all this." She explained the Wellness Center project and its potential statewide impact. Agent Blackwood listened intently. "Miss Rodriguez, Maria, what you've accomplished is remarkable. You've taken a property that was designed to protect and serve national interests and transformed it into something that protects and serves community interests. I think the presidents who once stayed there would be proud." As autumn returned, marking a full year since they'd moved to the farmhouse, the barn conversion was completed. The grand opening celebration drew hundreds of people from throughout the county. Maria stood before the crowd, Sophia beside her, feeling nervous but determined. "A year ago, my daughter and I came here with nothing but hope and $1,000. We were running from debt, from failure, from the collapse of the life we thought we wanted." She gestured toward the bustling wellness center behind them. "What we found here wasn't just shelter. It was a chance to rebuild not just our lives, but our purpose. This property taught us that sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning." Dr. Nash took the microphone next. "The mobile clinic program that Maria created has already served over 500 individuals who previously had little access to health care. But more than that, she's shown us how to turn personal transformation into community transformation. The mobile clinic, painted bright blue with Millfield Community Wellness emblazoned on its sides, sat proudly next to the barn. Its schedule was already booked solid for the next 2 months, serving remote mountain communities, migrant worker camps, and isolated elderly residents. As the celebration continued into the evening, Maria found quiet moments to reflect on their incredible journey. Sophia was playing with children from throughout the county, all of them now part of an extended community that hadn't existed a year ago. Agent Martinez appeared beside her, smiling. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I had to attend this event. What you've built here, it's extraordinary." "Agent Martinez, I didn't expect to see you here." "Actually, I'm not here in an official capacity. My mother lives in Pine Valley, one of the communities your mobile clinic serves. She's been raving about the care she's received. I wanted to thank you personally." They watched Sophia leading a group of children in an impromptu tour of the wellness center, explaining with 5-year-old authority how the mobile clinic worked and why it was important. "Your daughter is quite remarkable," Agent Martinez observed. She's taught me more about resilience than any adult ever could. When our life fell apart, I spent so much energy being angry about what we'd lost. Sophia just focused on what we were gaining. The wellness center had already evolved beyond Maria's original vision. The nutritionist who ran cooking classes had started a community garden that supplied fresh produce to families in need. The support groups had expanded to include everything from financial literacy to job training. Local artisans had begun displaying and selling their work in the center's common area. Dr. Nash had submitted a case study about their model to medical journals, highlighting how combining traditional healthcare with community support services and education dramatically improved health outcomes while reducing costs. 3 months after the opening, Maria received an unexpected phone call. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Senator Patricia Williams. I represent this district in Congress, and I've been hearing remarkable things about your community wellness center." "Senator Williams, what can I do for you?" "Actually, I'm calling to ask what we can do for you. I chair the Senate subcommittee on rural health, and we're preparing legislation that could provide federal funding for programs like yours nationwide. Would you be willing to testify about your experience?" Maria nearly dropped the phone. "Testify? In Washington? We believe. Your model represents the future of rural healthcare. Your personal story, from facing homelessness to creating a community resource, demonstrates exactly why we need innovative approaches to healthcare access." A month later, Maria found herself in a Senate hearing room, nervous but determined. She'd prepared her testimony carefully, with input from Dr. Nash and the Wellness Center team. "Senators, a year and a half ago, I was facing eviction with my 5-year-old daughter. Today I'm here because a desperate decision to buy an abandoned farmhouse led to discovering not just a home, but a purpose." She spoke about the barriers rural families faced in accessing healthcare, the transportation challenges, the lack of specialists, the difficulty taking time off work for medical appointments. She described how the mobile clinic addressed these issues while the wellness center tackled their root causes. "What we've learned is that health isn't just about medical care. It's about community support, education, access to healthy food, and hope for the future. When people feel supported and empowered, their health outcomes improve dramatically." The questions from senators were thoughtful and encouraging. Several shared stories from their own rural constituencies that echoed the challenges Maria described. Senator Williams concluded the hearing by announcing that the Rural Wellness Act would include funding specifically designed to replicate Maria's model in underserved areas nationwide. Flying home to Millfield, Maria marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a desperate single mother buying an abandoned property to advocating for healthcare policy in the nation's capital, it seemed impossible, yet every step had flowed naturally from the one before. Sophia, who had stayed with Rosa during the Washington trip, greeted her mother with a picture she'd drawn of Maria speaking to the important people in the big white building. "Mama, did you tell them about our house that helps people?" "I did, Misha, and they want to help more families create places like ours." That evening, sitting on their porch, as had become their tradition, Maria realized their story had become something larger than either of them. It had become proof that transformation is possible, that purpose can emerge from crisis, and that one person's courage to take a leap of faith can create waves of positive change that reach far beyond their own life. The farmhouse that had once housed presidents now stood at the center of a model that could improve healthcare access for millions of rural Americans. But more importantly to Maria, it remained a home where she and Sophia had learned that their greatest strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from meeting them with courage and turning them into opportunities to serve others. As the stars emerged in the clear country sky, Maria felt a deep satisfaction she'd never experienced during her more conventionally successful years. The abandoned farmhouse had given them far more than shelter. It had given them a chance to prove that every ending can become a beginning, and every challenge overcome makes the next one easier to face. Sophia drifted off to sleep against her mother's shoulder as they swung gently on the porch, both of them surrounded by the peaceful sounds of a community they'd helped create. A community where healing, hope, and transformation happened daily, all because one desperate mother had dared to bid on a mysterious property with her last $1,000. 2 years after that transformative Senate testimony, Maria stood before a gathering of international health officials at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. The journey from desperate single mother to global healthcare advocate still felt surreal, yet every step had prepared her for this moment. "Distinguished delegates," Maria began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the audience before her, "when I purchased an abandoned farmhouse for $1,000, I thought I was saving my daughter and myself from homelessness. I never imagined I was taking the first step toward revolutionizing rural healthcare delivery." The Rural Wellness Act had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, establishing funding for 50 pilot programs across the United States based on Maria's model. The results had exceeded every projection. Communities with wellness centers showed a 40% reduction in emergency room visits, a 60% improvement in preventive care compliance, and dramatic improvements in mental health outcomes. But the truly remarkable development came when international health organizations began studying the Millfield model. Countries with remote populations, from rural Australia to mountain villages in Nepal, were adapting Maria's combination of mobile clinics and community wellness centers to their own cultures and needs. Sophia, now 8 years old, sat in the front row, her Spanish-language interpreter helping her follow the proceedings. She'd insisted on coming, declaring that this was our story, and she wanted to see how many people Mama is helping now. "The key insight," Maria continued, "wasn't just bringing healthcare to underserved areas. It was recognizing that health emerges from community, from people supporting each other through education, shared resources, and collective purpose." Dr. Elena Vasquez, representing the Pan American Health Organization, leaned forward with interest. After the session, she approached Maria with a proposal that would change everything again. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we've been observing your model's success not just in rural American communities, but in how it's been adapted internationally. We're launching a global initiative called Community Healing Networks, and we want you to lead it." Maria felt the familiar flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension that seemed to accompany every major opportunity in her new life. "Lead it? I'm not a doctor or public health official. I'm just someone who... You're someone who understands. That transformation begins with meeting people where they are," Dr. Vasquez interrupted gently. "Your expertise isn't in medicine, it's in hope. That's exactly what this role requires. The position would involve traveling internationally to help establish wellness centers in underserved regions, training local communities to adapt the model to their specific needs and cultures. It meant upheaval again, but also the chance to extend their impact globally. That evening in their Geneva hotel room, Maria discussed the opportunity with Sophia while they shared room service and marveled at their view of Lake Geneva. "Mija, how would you feel about traveling to different countries to help people the way we've helped people in Millfield?" Sophia looked up from her drawing of the day's proceedings. "Would we still live at our farmhouse? It would still be our home. We'd travel for a few months each year, then return home. Our wellness center would keep running while we're gone." Sophia considered this seriously, as she did all major family decisions. "Mama, remember when we had that broken apartment and then found our special house?" "Of course. Maybe other kids in other places need to find their special houses too. And maybe we can help them. Her daughter's wisdom never ceased to amaze Maria. At 8, Sophia understood something many adults missed, that their story wasn't just about their own transformation, but about helping others discover their capacity for change. Maria accepted the position, beginning a new chapter that would take them across 6 continents over the next 3 years. Each country presented unique challenges and opportunities. In rural Guatemala, they worked with indigenous communities to integrate traditional healing practices with modern preventive care. Maria discovered that the shamans and community elders had wisdom about holistic health that complemented the wellness center model perfectly. "Señora Rodriguez," said Don Pablo, a respected community elder, "your model honors what we have always known, that healing comes from the entire community caring for each person." The Guatemala Center became a model for culturally sensitive healthcare integration, demonstrating how modern medical services could coexist with and enhance traditional practices rather than replace them. In Kenya, they adapted the model for communities affected by drought and climate change. The wellness center there included water purifications, education, drought-resistant agriculture training, and mobile clinics specifically designed for nomadic populations. Sophia thrived during these travels, becoming fluent in Spanish and picking up phrases in Swahili, French, and Portuguese. More importantly, she developed a global perspective that would shape her worldview forever. "Mama," she said one evening, as they watched sunset over the Serengeti during a weekend break from establishing the Kenya Center, "every place we go, people have different problems but the same wishes." "What wishes, sweetheart?" "They want their kids to be healthy and safe. They want to take care of their families. They want hope that tomorrow will be better than today." The insight struck Maria profoundly. Despite vast cultural and economic differences, the fundamental human needs they addressed remained constant across all communities. In Bangladesh, they faced their greatest challenge, establishing wellness centers in areas prone to flooding and cyclones. The solution came from the community itself, floating clinics and elevated community centers that could withstand natural disasters while continuing to serve people's needs. The Bangladesh project caught international attention when a typhoon struck during their 3rd month there. While other healthcare facilities were damaged or destroyed, the elevated wellness center became an evacuation point and emergency medical facility, saving dozens of lives. CNN interviewed Maria amid the recovery efforts. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your wellness center design prevented what could have been a humanitarian catastrophe. How did you know to build for these conditions?" "We didn't know," Maria answered honestly. "We listened to the community members who'd lived through these disasters before. They told us what they needed, and we figured out how to build it." This approach, community-driven design rather than outside experts imposing solutions, became a cornerstone of the global program's success. Each center looked different, served different needs, but all emerged from the same principle: empowering communities to define and address their own health challenges. 3 years into the global program, Maria received news that brought their journey full circle. Agent Blackwood called with information about the farmhouse's history that had just been declassified. "Maria, remember how we told you presidents used the farmhouse as a retreat? What we couldn't reveal then was that some of the nation's most important health policy decisions were made there. The creation of the modern CDC, the response to several disease outbreaks, even early AIDS policy discussions, they all happened in your kitchen and living room." The revelation felt like destiny. The farmhouse hadn't just sheltered presidents, it had been a birthplace for American public health policy. Now it was pioneering a new model for global health. "There's something else," Agent Blackwood continued. The Presidential Foundation wants to establish a permanent exhibit about the farmhouse's role in health policy history, including your work. They're calling it From Crisis to Cure, a Century of Health Innovation. Sophia, now 11 and increasingly interested in their story's historical significance, was thrilled. "Mama, our house is going to be in a museum. Part of it, Mija, but we'll still live there." The exhibit opening became a celebration of not just history, but of ongoing impact. The farmhouse hosted former presidents, current health officials, and community wellness center coordinators from around the world. President Carter, now quite elderly but still sharp, sought out Maria specifically. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I remember making difficult health policy decisions in that house decades ago. To see what you've built there now, it's exactly what we hoped those policies might eventually create." Former President Obama spoke at the ceremony. Maria Rodriguez represents the best of American innovation, taking a personal challenge and transforming it into a solution that benefits the world. The Wellness Center model proves that the most effective policies often come from communities, not just from Washington. But the moment that moved Maria most came during the community portion of the celebration. Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman from one of the mountain communities served by the mobile clinic, stood to speak. "Before Mrs. Rodriguez came, my diabetes was killing me slowly. I couldn't afford to travel for care, couldn't understand the medical instructions given in English. Now I manage my health well, help others in my community do the same, and my granddaughter wants to become a nurse because she sees how healthcare can change lives." Stories like Mrs. Chen's had multiplied across hundreds of communities worldwide. The Wellness Center network now served over 2 million people globally, with new centers opening every month. Dr. Nash, who had taken over day-to-day operations of the original Millfield Center, announced the most ambitious expansion yet. "Thanks to a coalition of international donors and governments, we're launching Health for All 2030, a plan to establish 1,000 community wellness centers globally by 2030. Maria felt overwhelmed by the scope of what had grown from her desperate auction bid. But Sophia, now mature beyond her years, reminded her of something important. "Mama, remember what you always tell me about our story, that we don't focus on how big it got, but on how it helps one person at a time." That evening, after the last guests had left and the media had packed up, Maria and Sophia sat on their porch swing, the same spot where they'd spent countless evenings throughout their journey. The farmhouse glowed softly in the evening light, its windows revealing glimpses of the presidential history exhibit inside. Beyond it, the Wellness Center hummed with activity as evening support groups met and the night clinic staff prepared for their shift. "Mama," Sophia said thoughtfully, "do you think we would have ended up here if Daddy hadn't left?" It was a question Maria had considered many times. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe we needed to lose everything to discover what we were really capable of building." "I'm glad we found our purpose," Sophia said, "even if the beginning was sad." Maria pulled her daughter close, marveling at how their greatest losses had become their greatest gifts. The financial ruin that forced them to buy the farmhouse, the desperation that made her bold enough to bid, the challenges that developed their resilience. Each seeming disaster had been a stepping stone to their current life. A year later, at the 5th anniversary celebration of the first International Wellness Center in Guatemala, Maria stood before an audience that included health ministers from 43 countries, Nobel Prize winners, and hundreds of community health workers. 5 years ago, a desperate mother's $1,000 gamble led to a presidential safe house becoming a community wellness center. Today, that model serves millions of people on 6 continents. But the most important measurement of our success isn't in statistics, it's in stories. She gestured to a video screen showing testimonials from across the global network. Farmers, in Kenya whose children survived drought-related illness thanks to early intervention, indigenous women in Peru who became community health educators, preserving traditional knowledge while embracing modern preventive care, fishermen in Bangladesh whose floating clinic meant their families received care despite annual floods. Each wellness center represents the same principle that saved my daughter and me, that transformation happens when we stop seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance and start seeing ourselves as architects of change. The audience's standing ovation was thunderous, but Maria's attention was drawn to Sophia, now 12, who sat in the front row wearing a Future Health Leader t-shirt she'd designed herself. After the ceremony, Dr. Vasquez approached with news about the program's latest recognition. Maria, the Global Health Council has selected our Community Wellness Center model for their Lifetime Achievement Award. You're the youngest recipient in the award's history. Dr. Vasquez, this was never about awards or recognition. I know. That's exactly why you deserve this. You've proven that the most effective global health interventions come from understanding local communities and empowering them to lead their own transformation. As they flew home to Millfield that evening, Maria reflected on how far they'd traveled, not just geographically, but personally. The scared, desperate woman who'd made that auction bid seemed like a different person entirely, yet Maria knew she carried all those experiences within her. Sophia had fallen asleep against the window, her notebook open to sketches of wellness, centers and ideas for new programs. At 12, she already spoke confidently about pursuing a career in international health, inspired by years of witnessing her mother's work. The farmhouse came into view as their car turned up the familiar gravel driveway. Home. No matter how far they traveled or how many lives they touched around the world, this property remained their anchor, a reminder of where transformation began. That night, tucking Sophia into bed in the room that had once been a presidential guest suite, Maria marveled at the symmetry of their story. A house that had once hosted the most powerful people in America now nurtured a child who would grow up believing she could change the world because she'd seen it happen every day of her life. "Mama," Sophia said sleepily, "when I'm older and start my own wellness centers, will you come help me?" "Always, Mija. But I think by then you'll be teaching me." Standing on the porch one last time before heading to bed, Maria gazed over their land. The wellness center lights twinkled in the converted barn. Night shift workers prepared the mobile clinic for tomorrow's route to mountain communities. In the distance, lights from neighboring farmhouses dotted the landscape, many of them families whose lives had been touched by the programs that began right here. A shooting star streaked across the clear sky, and Maria made a wish, not for herself or even for Sophia, but for every person around the world still facing their own desperate moment, still believing their situation was hopeless. She wished for them to discover what she and Sophia had learned, that our greatest challenges often disguise our greatest opportunities, and that transformation is always possible for those brave enough to take the first step. The farmhouse had given them shelter, but more importantly, it had taught them that home isn't just where you live. It's where you discover who you're meant to become and what you're meant to contribute to the world. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, those two things align perfectly in a place where healing happens not just for individuals, but for entire communities reaching toward hope. Maria Rodriguez had bid $1,000 for an abandoned farmhouse and received a lifetime of purpose in return. But the real return on that investment was measured in the millions of lives touched by the belief that everyone deserves access to health, hope, and the chance to transform their circumstances into something beautiful. As she turned off the porch light and headed inside, Maria smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new chances to prove that extraordinary Change often begins with ordinary courage, and she and Sophia would face it together, from the home that had taught them that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing everything, because it forces you to discover what you're truly capable of building. 10 years had passed since Maria Rodriguez first bid on the abandoned farmhouse with her last $1,000. Now, on a crisp autumn morning, she watched from the porch as Sophia, now 15, led a group of young international delegates on a tour of the wellness center. The girl who had once asked if presidents really lived in their house was now confidently explaining healthcare innovation to teenagers from 30 different countries. The mobile clinic averages 200 patient contacts per week, Sophia was saying, but the real measure of success is community ownership. Each location adapts our basic model to their specific cultural and environmental needs. Maria smiled as she overheard this. Sophia had grown up immersed in global health discussions, but more importantly, she developed an intuitive understanding of how transformation happens from the ground up. The occasion, bringing all these young people together, was the first Global Youth Health Innovation Summit hosted right here at the farmhouse. Young leaders from wellness centers around the world had come to collaborate on the next generation of community health solutions. Dr. Amara Okafor from Nigeria raised her hand. Sophia, how do you maintain quality control when each center operates so differently? That's the beautiful part, Sophia replied. We don't control from the top. We trust communities to know what works for them and share successful innovations through our global network. Control doesn't create sustainability. Ownership does. The wisdom in her daughter's words struck Maria afresh. At 15, Sophia understood principles that had taken Maria years to learn through experience. Agent Blackwood, now retired but serving on the Wellness Center Advisory Board, approached Maria on the porch. She's remarkable, Maria, born into this work but choosing it for herself. I sometimes worry she's never had a normal childhood, Maria confessed. Normal is overrated, Agent Blackwood chuckled. She's had an extraordinary childhood that's prepared her for an extraordinary purpose. Look at her. She's not burdened by this legacy. She's energized by it. Indeed, Sophia seemed to light up when discussing community health innovations. She'd spent summers working in wellness centers across the Americas, learning Spanish fluently and picking up Portuguese and French. But more than languages, she'd absorbed different cultural approaches to healing and community care. The farmhouse itself had evolved to support its expanding mission. The presidential history exhibit occupied the front rooms, while the back of the house served as a residential center for visiting health workers and researchers. The kitchen, where presidents had once made crucial health policy decisions, now hosted daily meal programs for international trainees. Dr. Nash, now director of the Global Community Wellness Institute, joined Maria and Agent Blackwood on the porch. The data from this year's global assessment is extraordinary, she announced, barely containing her excitement. Tell me, Maria said, settling into her favorite porch chair. 3 million people are now served by our wellness center. Network across 47 countries. Emergency room visits in served communities have decreased by an average of 52%. Preventive care compliance is at 78%. But the most remarkable statistic is this. 89% of wellness centers have become completely self-sustaining within 3 years. The self-sustainability metric had always been Maria's most important success measure. True transformation meant communities could eventually support their own health resources without ongoing external funding. There's more, Dr. Nash continued. The UN has formally recognized our model as the most effective approach to achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 3, ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages. Later that afternoon, Maria received a call that would once again redirect their journey in unexpected ways. The caller identified herself as Dr. Catherine Morrison, Director of Global Health Innovation at the Gates Foundation. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm calling with an unprecedented opportunity. The Gates Foundation, in partnership with several world governments and private foundations, is launching the largest global health initiative in history. We want to base it entirely on your wellness center model. Maria listened as Dr. Morrison outlined the scope. A $50 billion commitment over 10 years to establish wellness centers in every underserved community worldwide, rural areas, urban slums, refugee camps, indigenous territories, island nations. We're calling it the Global Healing Initiative, and we want you to lead it. The magnitude was overwhelming. Dr. Morrison, I don't even know how to respond to something of that scale. You don't have to respond today. But Maria, you've proven that sustainable health transformation is possible. Now we have the resources to make it universal. Every person on Earth should have access to the kind of community-centered care you've pioneered. That evening, as international delegates gathered for dinner in the barn-turned-conference center, Maria found herself thinking about scale and purpose. They'd started with one desperate family needing shelter and stumbled into revolutionizing global health. How far could they reasonably expand while maintaining the personal, community-centered approach that made their model effective? Sophia seemed to sense her mother's contemplation during dinner. Afterward, they took their traditional evening walk around the property. "Mama, you're thinking about the Gates Foundation offer, aren't you?" Maria shouldn't have been surprised that Sophia had overheard. "How do you feel about it?" "I think about Mom Chen," Sophia said, referring to the elderly woman who'd been one of their first mobile clinic success stories and had since become a family friend. "Remember what she told us last year?" Maria recalled the conversation. Mrs. Chen had said, "When one candle lights another, neither flame grows smaller. Your light has lit many candles, and now they're lighting others." "You think we should accept?" Sophia stopped walking and turned to face her mother. "I think we should ask ourselves the same question we always ask. How can we help one more person find hope and healing? If this initiative means millions more people get that chance, how can we say no?" 3 months later, Maria stood before the United Nations General Assembly to announce the launch of the Global Healing Initiative. Sophia sat in the gallery, now an official youth ambassador for global health, having been selected to represent young voices in the initiative's leadership. Structure. "Esteemed delegates," Maria began, 15 years ago, I was a desperate single mother facing homelessness. Today, I stand before you representing a model of healthcare that serves millions worldwide. The journey from that farmhouse auction to this moment proves that transformation is possible at any scale, personal, community, or global. She outlined the initiative's ambitious goals: wellness centers in every underserved community within a decade, mobile health services reaching the most remote populations, and comprehensive health education programs that would create a generation of community health advocates. But this initiative's success won't be measured solely in numbers served or dollars spent. It will be measured in dreams realized, in children who grow up believing healthcare is a right rather than a privilege, and in communities that discover their own capacity for healing and growth. The speech was translated simultaneously into dozens of languages, broadcast live to communities around the world that would benefit from the initiative. In Guatemala, where they'd established one of the first international centers, community members gathered around radios and smartphones to listen. Back home in Millfield, Rosa, now 85, but still sharp as ever, listened from her kitchen while preparing lunch for volunteers at the local wellness center. She wept openly, remembering the desperate young woman who'd once confided her, plans to bid on an abandoned farmhouse. The implementation of the Global Healing Initiative began with a ceremony at the Millfield Farmhouse. Representatives from 100 countries came to sign partnership agreements and receive training from teams who'd perfected the wellness center model over the past decade. Sophia played an increasingly prominent role, designing youth leadership programs and establishing the Young Global Health Leaders Network. At 16, she was already being featured in international media as a voice for her generation's approach to global health. The previous generation saw health as something that happens to you, she told a BBC interviewer. My generation sees health as something we actively create through community, education, and supporting each other. We're not patients waiting for care, we're partners in creating wellness. The farmhouse renovations to accommodate the initiative's headquarters were extensive. The basement was converted into a global communications center where real-time data from wellness centers worldwide was monitored and analyzed. The attic became an archives preserving the stories of transformation from every community served. But Maria insisted on preserving the farmhouse's essential character. The porch, where she and Sophia had spent countless evenings planning their future, remained unchanged. The kitchen, where presidents had once debated health policy and where Maria had first dared to dream beyond mere survival, still served its function as the heart of the home. 1 year into the Global Healing Initiative, the results exceeded even optimistic projections. Over 500 new wellness centers had been established, each adapting the core model to local needs and cultures. In Madagascar, centers specialized in combating malnutrition among children. In Afghanistan, they focused on maternal health and women's education. In Pacific Island nations, they integrated traditional navigation knowledge with modern climate. Health adaptation strategies. Sophia, now 17 and splitting her time between finishing high school and her global health work, had become a sought-after speaker on youth leadership in health innovation, her perspective shaped by growing up within the wellness center movement, offered insights that even seasoned professionals found valuable. My mother always says our story began with loss, Sophia told an audience of health ministers in Switzerland. But I think it began with choice. The choice to see possibility where others saw only problems. The choice to help others even when you need help yourself. The choice to believe that one person's action can change the world. The farmhouse had become more than a home or even a headquarters. It had become a pilgrimage site for health workers worldwide. People came not just for training, but to experience the place where community-centered healthcare had first taken root. Maria often found herself serving as an informal counselor to visiting health workers facing their own challenges. One evening, she sat on the porch with Dr. Sarah Kimani from Kenya, who was struggling with resistance to their wellness center model from traditional medical establishments. They think we're undermining proper medical care, Dr. Kimani confided. How do you convince people that prevention and community support are real medicine? Maria remembered her own early doubts, her imposter syndrome when speaking to medical professionals despite her obvious success. I don't try to convince anyone anymore, she said gently. I let the results speak. When communities become healthier, when people take ownership of their wellness, when children grow up without preventable diseases, that's the most powerful argument. The Global Healing Initiative faced significant challenges as it scaled. Cultural misunderstandings, political resistance in some regions, and the constant pressure to standardize rather than localize threatened the community-centered approach that made the model effective. Sophia emerged as a crucial voice in preserving the initiative's core principles while navigating these challenges. Her youth, combined with her deep understanding of the model's philosophy, allowed her to bridge generational and cultural gaps that sometimes stymied older leaders. We're not exporting American healthcare, she explained to critics in a televised debate. We're exporting hope and the tools for communities to develop their own health solutions. Every wellness center looks different because every community is different. By the initiative's third year, Maria made a decision that surprised many. She announced her intention to step back from day-to-day leadership and return to community-level work. "I need to remember why we started this," she explained to the board of directors. "The numbers and policies and global strategies are important, but individual stories of transformation are what this has always been about." She established the Maria Rodriguez Fellowship, which would bring her back to community wellness centers around the world to work directly with individuals and families, documenting their stories and ensuring the human element never got lost in the initiative's growth. Sophia, meanwhile, had been accepted to Harvard's dual degree program in medicine and public health, but deferred to spend 2 years working full-time with the Global Healing Initiative. Her decision sparked international discussion about alternative paths to leadership in global health. "I'll learn medicine," she told reporters, "but first I'm learning healing. There's a difference." On the 15th anniversary of purchasing the farmhouse, Maria organized a celebration that brought together people whose lives had been touched by the wellness center model. The event wasn't about achievements or statistics. It was about stories. Mrs. Chen, now healthy in her 90s and still actively involved in her mountain community's wellness center, spoke via video link. "15 years ago, I was dying slowly and alone. Today, I help teach other elders how to manage their health. Maria gave us more than medicine. She gave us purpose." A young man from Bangladesh shared how surviving the typhoon in the elevated wellness center as a child had inspired him to become an engineer, designing climate-resilient health facilities. A woman from Guatemala explained how the culturally integrated wellness center had allowed her to become the first in her family to receive regular medical care while honoring her ancestors' healing traditions. But the most moving moment came when Sophia took the stage to speak about growing up in the movement her mother had created. "I've never known a world where community health wasn't at the center of everything," she began. "But I've learned that what seems normal to me, the idea that everyone deserves healthcare, that communities can solve their own problems with the right support, that one person's courage can change everything, these aren't normal ideas everywhere." She looked out at the diverse audience gathered in the barn that had once housed farm equipment and now hosted global health leaders. "My mother bought an abandoned farmhouse because she had no other choice. But every day since then, she's made choices that put other people's well-being before her own comfort. That's not normal either, but maybe it should be." The celebration concluded with the announcement of the next phase of the Global Healing Initiative, the youth leadership transition. Sophia would officially take over as Director of Global Operations on her 20th birthday, making her the youngest person ever to lead a major international health organization. The future of global health belongs to people who grew up believing healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. Maria explained her decision to step aside for Sophia's leadership. "My daughter represents that future." That night, as fireworks lit up the sky over Millfield and international guests shared stories late into the evening, Maria sat quietly on her porch with Rosa, who had remained her closest confidant through all the changes. "Mija," Rosa said softly, "do you ever miss the simple life? When it was just you and Sophia in that little apartment?" Maria considered the question seriously. Their life had become complex beyond anything she could have imagined. International, travel, media attention, enormous responsibility for global health outcomes. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," she admitted. "But Rosa, I've learned that simple and easy aren't the same thing. Our life is complicated now, but it's also purposeful in ways I never dreamed possible. And Sophia thrives in this complexity. She was born for this work." As if summoned by her words, Sophia appeared in the doorway, having just finished a video call with youth health advocates in 6 different time zones. "Ready for tomorrow's site visits, Mama?" she asked, settling onto the porch steps. Tomorrow would bring delegations from 5 countries looking to establish wellness centers in refugee camps, one of the most challenging applications of their model yet. "Ready," Maria confirmed. "Are you?" Sophia grinned. "I've been ready my whole life." Looking out over their property, the restored farmhouse, the bustling wellness center, the mobile clinic garage, the international training facilities, Maria marveled at the journey that had brought them here. 15 years ago, she'd been a desperate woman with $1,000 and a 5-year-old daughter facing homelessness and believing her life was over. Tonight, she was a global health leader whose work touched millions of lives, whose model was transforming communities worldwide, and whose daughter was poised to carry that work forward into the next generation. The abandoned farmhouse that had seemed like her last resort had actually been her first step toward a purpose she never could have imagined. Every challenge they'd faced, financial ruin, government intervention, cultural barriers, scaling difficulties, had ultimately strengthened both the model and their resolve. As the last guests found their way to guest rooms and dormitories scattered across the property, Maria and Sophia remained on the porch, sharing the comfortable silence of people who had worked together toward a common goal for so long that words weren't always necessary. "Mama," Sophia finally said, "do you think we've changed the world?" Maria looked at her daughter, poised, confident, compassionate, ready to lead a global health initiative at 20 years old, and realized the most important change they'd created wasn't in statistics or infrastructure. "I think we've proven that the world can be changed," she replied. "One person, one family, one community at a time. The rest is just scale." A shooting star streaked across the sky above their farmhouse, and both women made wishes, not for themselves, but for all the families around the world who were still facing their own desperate moments, still believing their situations were hopeless. They wished for those families to discover what they had learned, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we create. The farmhouse had sheltered presidents making health policy, then sheltered a desperate mother and daughter seeking safety. Now it sheltered a global movement, proving that extraordinary change often begins with ordinary courage, and that purpose emerges most clearly in our darkest moments. As Maria and Sophia finally headed inside, the lights of the wellness center continued to glow in the converted barn, where night shift workers prepared for another day of bringing hope and healing to communities around the world. The work would continue, led by Sophia's generation, but rooted in the simple truth Maria had discovered that desperate day at the auction. Sometimes all it takes to change everything is one person willing to bet everything on hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.